This is ODAAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
This podcast is sponsored by Audible.com. This is by far my favorite app. I talk a lot about the teachers and books that have helped me over the years. And these days, I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm traveling, driving, grocery shopping, whatever. And as of right now, I actually have 64 titles on my phone. And that might sound a little obsessive, but it does a great job of drowning out the inner critic with something positive. So there's that. And if you'd like to listen to one of the books recommended or even written by one of the guests on my show, you can get your first one free by visiting ODAATchat.com and clicking on the Audible button on the right. I hope you love it as much as I do. Welcome to ODAAT Chat, where we talk about how to stay sober one day at a time. My name is Arlena, and I'll be your host. If you're new here, this is a podcast where my guests and I talk about how to recover from alcoholism and addictions. We typically spend the first half of the podcast on the backstory, but the magic is really in the solution, which is what we try to focus on. I'm looking to uncover the moments of clarity, the revelations, and the tools and practices for healing, which lead to long-term recovery. I'm here to support you, so leave any questions or comments you have on the Facebook page, which you can find by searching for the ODAAT Chat podcast, and ODAAT is spelled O-D-A-A-T. Today, my guest is with Ayanna Parent, who shares about what it was like growing up with a mother who struggled with alcoholism, addiction, and homelessness. She shares pretty candidly about the traumas she endured and how it led to her own struggles with alcohol. Ayanna also shares her journey into recovery, finding the love of her life, and the sweetest adoption of her little girl. She has dedicated her life to helping others and is now the founder of Be Free Coaching and Consulting. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Ayanna. Ayanna, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me on the ODAAT Chat podcast.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. So where are you located right now? You're on the East Coast, is that right?
I am in Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And it's mid-January, so you must be freezing.
It's a little cold here, yeah. It's a little icy this morning driving to my office. Yep. I wasn't loving it, but the beaches are still beautiful.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. In California, we're a bunch of big babies, so anything under 30 degrees, we're like, oh my God, I'm going to die.
Oh my God. Is it warm there right now? No, don't tell me.
It's freezing.
Is it really? Freezing
No,
is what?
It's not. It's nice. So listen, I'm excited to have you on because I actually was introduced to you through an email. I'm on Anna David's newsletter, and then she profiled you, and I went to your website and learned a little. I was stalking you. That's what I was doing. And
That's okay. I like stalking. As long as you're honest about it, I'm good with that. I'm good.
Right? Yeah. No ulterior motives. Just here to love. That's my job. But I thought you would be a great person to speak to because you have so much going on, and I really love the work that you're doing, and I really feel your intention of wanting to bring love and healing into the world, and that's really what I'm about too. So I feel like, she's this kindred spirit, and I just feel like you have so much to share. So thanks again for being on.
Thanks for contacting me. My pleasure.
Yeah. So usually what I do is, because this is a podcast, I usually ask people to sort of help paint a picture in people's minds of who's talking. So maybe you can just give me like a brief description of maybe what you look like, and, and we'll certainly talk about, the Be Free coaching and consulting, and you're also a fitness instructor, so you're super fit. So yeah, just give me a brief description of what you look like.
Yeah, I suppose I'm medium height. I'm biracial, so I have, the mix of the skins there. So my mom, she passed away, but she's black. My dad's white, Portuguese. So I have like the olivey type of skin, medium height. I'd say my arms are pretty, as far as like, fitness stuff. My arms probably stand out as the most.
That's right.
Thing as far as like
Amazing arms, yes.
Yeah, I get some chaturanga from yoga, though. I tell people I do a lot of fitness stuff, but a lot of it is mainly from yoga.
Oh, that's good to hear, because yoga seems like a gentle way to get into shape. It's not as, painful or torturous as maybe weights can be sometimes.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. And like you said, you're on the East Coast. And tell me a little bit about Be Free coaching and consulting. Like, I know that free isn't an acronym, but tell me how that name came about.
Oh, sure. It's kind of a funny story. So I just started in August, and I just opened my office on August 1st of 2017, and I was trying to think of a name, and I have a little sushi club that I call. It's a bunch of girls that just meet that just chit-chat about business stuff. And so I was like, I don't know what to call this thing. Like, I know what I want to do. It was all written down. The motto was written down, but I just didn't know what to call it. And she's like, one of my friends said, how do you want your people to feel when they're done with your coaching? I was like, oh my God, I just want them to feel free. I just want them to feel like their life is super free, and that's all that they think about, wake up, that there's nothing that's holding them back from anything. And then I was like, oh. There's Be Free. And there was the born, yeah. And so then I came up with the acronym of Find, Recover, Involve, and Enjoy. And so I broke it down into those pieces. And so the finding obviously is really just finding a piece of yourself. Like I truly believe you can't do anything unless you know who you are. So the first piece is just finding out those specific things. We spend a lot of time on that. And then recover is just identifying like what it is that's sort of holding you back from that. Not going hugely into anything, but, I do a lot of work with people in recovery from addictions, but I also do a lot of work. I mean, we're all recovering from something, right? So
that's true.
It can be anything. Yeah, just anything from, trauma to divorce to sometimes someone just comes in like, I'm just so unhappy. I just have no clue why.
Yeah.
And those are actually the greatest people to work with because they're just so open to anything.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then Evolve is really just integrating the tools. There's a bunch of tools I use with meditation, yoga, writing, reflection, all that kind of stuff. So integrating those tools and then enjoying. So just making a plan for how you're going to go about your life feeling free.
Oh, I love that.
That's the brief description.
No, that's so good.
It's a lot more than that, but that's the brief breaking down how I work.
No, I love that. And I think if people want to learn more, they can certainly go to your website. I'll put a link in the show notes so they can, just reach out and say hi, learn a little bit more about you. And yeah, so we'll definitely pull that in there. And you mentioned recovery, and this is a recovery podcast. I would love to hear your story.
Yeah.
I typically follow the general, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So do you want to take 5-10 minutes to sort of cover the highlights of your story?
Sure, I'd love to. Let's see. So I'm a recovering alcoholic. Let's start there.
I know.
I mean, sometimes it's different for different people.
It is, yeah.
And it's been a long journey. I would say I was active alcoholic for at least, 15 to 20 years of my life. Really started after college, so I won't tell you how old I am, but all right, fine, I'll tell you how old I am. I'm 44, so I'm like, wait, I should be proud. I need people to be proud of who they are every day. So here we are in a podcast. Let me just say how old I am.
Yeah. It's a privilege denied many. That's how I like to look at it.
Yeah, it's fine. I feel young. Yeah. So, it ebbed and flowed for a really long time. And there was pieces in there, obviously, that I was like a heavy drinker. It was like all about wine. Like I really just would like be social with wine. But then, the wine just wouldn't stop. And other people would. And then it just became such a habit. Like I just couldn't get out of the habit. And for a long time, people were telling me it was a problem. And I just didn't believe it. I was like, I don't know. This is how much people drink. What are you talking about? So-and-so's drinking way more than me, and it just sort of became what it was. And then my mom died probably about 10 years ago, and she had sort of a really horrific history. So my past is she was a real severe alcoholic, and she was drug addicted, and she lived on the streets, and she was homeless.
Oh, wow.
And there was certain parts where I was living with her in homeless shelters, and she was, in and out of my life. And that piece for me, I think when I was younger, was super, super traumatic. And if people say that there's an identification of sort of like where the alcohol came from. Obviously, there's lots of different, pieces to it, but I would say that was pretty traumatic. So there's a lot of time without her, and she and I were super close when I was young. So she did end up coming back into my life after college, but ironically, that's sort of when all my drinking started.
Oh, interesting.
Because it was just, it was a lot. She was in recovery, sort of, but she wasn't doing any programming. She didn't believe in social work. So I pretty much became her sponsor. And she had alienated every single other person in her world. Mm-hmm. So I was it.
Wow.
And, I wasn't going to give up, the second chance I had with her. So I pretty much became her whole world. And I pretty much, forgot about mine. I tell people all the time, my life is starting now. For the whole time I was, taking care of her. And then she got sick. She had emphysema. And who knows, she was on the streets for so long. Her body just started to give out. So then she passed away 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years in September. But there was a lot of time where I just took over. And then my addiction was super active. It was just nonstop. It was, I couldn't deal with the grief. I had no coping mechanism. I didn't know who I was in the world without her. It was even though she wasn't around that whole time, it's just I couldn't fathom life. I just couldn't figure it out. And the only thing, I keep saying, people laugh, I'm Chardonnay was my best friend. It was the only thing that brought me comfort, it was at that time. And I wasn't open about it at all. My friends were concerned, but I would chalk it up to you haven't lived through your parent dying, all that kind of stuff. You start to deflect and defend. And then things got a little bit better. I started to, this is when the teaching came into practice. I started to do Zumba. I wanted to get healthier. I didn't want to feel that way at all anymore. So I got super into Zumba, and I actually did stop drinking probably almost a year. And I started to go to AA and started to kind of do all that stuff. But I didn't have a sponsor, and I was more by myself. I was afraid to talk to people about it. I wasn't sort of in the place that I am now where I celebrate it, and it's the greatest thing. I was super ashamed.
Right.
I didn't want to talk to anybody. I knew everyone knew it was a problem. I was at weddings, falling down, and no one else was. 7 o'clock, right? So I knew everyone else knew it was a problem, but I just couldn't connect the two enough. So I started drinking more. And then I met my husband, my current husband, who I am with now, and that's why I moved to the Cape. He has 2 sons here in a house, and so I moved down here. I was living in Boston for years and years. And everything was okay. I was oh, I have this. Now I have support. I'm fine. No big deal, right? You move to a new place. Isn't that what they always say?
Right.
You think
a little geographic.
Your addiction will leave you, right? No. So then, we got married pretty quick. We were super in love. It was
when you say ever. Quick, how quick was that?
We got engaged on our year anniversary, and then we got married that September. So I guess it's not that quick, but
yeah, that seems reasonable. I've heard way worse.
Okay.
Or not worse. I'm sorry. I mean, shorter.
Yeah. No, yeah. So we were, things were going. He had 2 sons. I was getting on great with them. It was fine. And then we had talked about having another child. And we tried for a while. I honestly was just never a person that really wanted to be pregnant. But I knew I wanted a baby with him. And then one day we were just talking. And so my husband works for the Department of Children and Families as well. Or he's a social worker as well. And so I'm a licensed clinician social worker. So I did that for years before I did, any of the movement or fitness stuff. And we just were why don't we just adopt? What are we doing here? Yeah. Yeah, let's just get a kid that needs a home and just love them up. We don't have to really, and I knew I wanted a girl. I knew, I wanted a little girl. So it was in that regard, it was you can kind of, it sounds horrible, but order them up.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, so it's fine. And then, that was such a long process, and that became really stressful. And we were fostering her, and there was no idea of when the rights of the mom was going to be terminated. And for me, it started bringing up all these memories. It was really fascinating as I look back on it now. It was not at the time, because it was a horrible experience. Not having her, I don't want you to think that.
Right.
But for me, it was bringing up all these memories of when I was little, and sort of how parents should, because I would look at her and I would love her so deeply, and I'd have this vision of my mom not being there. And it was just
brought up all your stuff, huh?
Oh my God, it was PTSD in your face. I couldn't get away from it.
Wow. And
so my drinking just went, I was drinking during the day. I don't even know what. I was all I could do to feel better. Because it was my skin was crawling. I couldn't, and I'm a social worker, so I tell people how to deal with this all the time. But when it's yourself, you just don't, you don't have a way out. There's no.
Right.
And then as a social worker, I was getting so much guilt that this was happening to me and I couldn't help myself. So the more that guilt piled on, and then I wasn't a good mom on top of it. So it was like guilt, shame, like, oh my God. It was like the whole thing.
Compounding, yeah.
Yes. So finally it was just, and then finally I just didn't want to be this for my family or for her, for this child that we were adopting.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to treatment and I was just like, I have to get under this. And I ended up going twice, which I think was the best choice ever. Because I swear to God, the first time I went to treatment, I was like a deer in headlights. You don't know what's happening. Like you see people around me, bodies, like it's Charlie Brown, like talking to you, like, do this, read the steps, breathe. Like, what? Like, where am I? Let's start with that.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's so disorienting, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So the second time, I was like, it was like I put my money where my mouth was. I worked the steps. I did so much journaling, and that's how I got into yoga. So I could never do yoga before because it was so slow. Like, I couldn't slow my mind down.
Right.
And so, I could teach Zumba. I could do all these other crazy, fun fitness things. But when it came to yoga, it was too slow. My mind would go to every bad place that I'd ever done anything bad. But then I was lying on the floor, like, crying in rehab and thought, like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen if I do yoga right now? Like, everyone else is freaking out around me.
Right.
I'm just going to fit right in. Like, what's the better place to be a puddle but here?
Aww.
And then I remember the moment that I, like, could control my breath and could control my thoughts. So it was like once I figured out how to breathe, I figured out that I could bring positive thoughts and replace the negative thoughts, and it would shift my mood automatically. And then because of the movement of yoga, because I like to move so much, it just became this, like, amazing, wonderful thing. So I just went and got trained, and I was like, I'm going to tell everybody how to do this. And and that's sort of where Be Free.
Yeah. Isn't that I was just thinking, isn't it amazing, like, when we discover the thing that heals us, that it seems like everybody's first reaction is, oh my God, I have to tell everybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like we become saved and then we want to turn around and give it away. It just seems like it's human nature to want to, help others because it's such a surprise that that we're able to be free of all that negativity.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was the only thing. Like, I tried a million things. I mean, the steps are helpful in terms of, like, structure and, having a format. But being able to turn, like I always talk to people about, being able to internalize that is a very different thing. It's super powerful when you can figure out how to do it on your own, especially, like, people who have pride like me. Like, the shame obviously was such a big part of my story, but to be able to do it internally was super powerful. So I was like, oh my God, wait, I don't have to feel like this all the time. Like, I have control over the powerful parts of my mind and my body if I just hone into this. Right. And it does take practice. Like, it did take me a lot. Like, I didn't know how to do yoga. I was, like, so against it. There's people, you go to classes, people doing headstands. I'm like, oh my God.
You're
and now
no.
I teach headstands. But, like, yeah, I could teach it all now. But it did, in the beginning, it was like a foreign world to me. I was like, what are these people doing?
Isn't that funny? We have so much judgment.
So much judgment. Like, oh my God.
Isn't that something? I want to ask you, so you mentioned that you worked steps in treatment, and I've had that experience too where, but then you mentioned, like, doing yoga, you couldn't do it at first because your mind was racing. I wonder if there is a connection, maybe even a small one, of when you work the steps, you sort of, like, for me, it was a process of sorting things out. And once I had it sorted out, in a way, it kind of gave me control over, it was like dominion over, like, all these crazy emotions, being able to separate it all out. And once I was able to do that, my mind did quiet a little bit after that. Did you have a similar experience?
Yes and no. I didn't love the steps. So some of the language, it was tough for me because some of it, like, when you read all the empowerment books of, like, be in your power, and then you're writing down all these, like, horrible, negative, awful things. So that piece was hard for me. So I had more of the connection with the yoga of, like, letting it free. What it did for me, though, was it did give structure to, like, who and how and when and how did I get to this place. So having some structure around sort of, like, where, what turn and what transitions and what, and you do have to take responsibility for the things and the pieces of it. But I have to be so careful about the shame piece for me because that'll bring me right down a bad hole. So I have to like sort of reframe a lot of the language, just to make sure that it's positive first.
Positive first.
Yeah.
It sounds like your experience was with the steps was focused on the negativity part. Like there was no balance in there.
There's some balance. Yeah, there is some balance, but there's some pieces that aren't. Like it is hard to look at negative stuff like all in one spot. Even though like that's part of the work, it is part of it. So I'd have to just reframe some of it. And
I would have to. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I feel so strongly that this is so important that, and I do feel like in the 12-step community, there is a lot. I agree with you. There is a lot of emphasis on the negativity, and I think it's so important to like find the people who are in touch with, once the addiction and everything is resolved, it's like, what's next? Like focus on the positive. It's like we do this inventory and we get clear about our character defects, but a lot of times that's where people stop. They don't focus on the assets, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and defects, even that word, like makes me like, whoa, what are you talking? Like, you know what I mean? It makes you feel like there's something wrong. Yeah. Even though I know the theory behind it, and I know that it's part of the addiction, but saying that part of your character is defective is tough.
Yeah,
for me.
And I understand that. Like, so instead of defective, I liked human frailties. This one woman used to talk about having human frailties, and it just seems like a more compassionate, loving way to. And really, all that is, it's just your instincts that are out of balance, right? And being out of balance, that's not a shameful thing. That's not like a... So character defects is, with the juxtaposition to human frailties. I like the human frailties better.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, okay, so you did treatment a couple times, and then I'm just curious, what was your concept of God or a higher power, or can you sort of walk me through what your concept of the higher power is?
Sure. I was never like opposed to God or the higher power notion. I know like a lot of people struggled with that, especially in treatment. They were like, I don't believe in God. And I know so many people, always want to talk to me because I have like a little bit of an alternative perspective on AA. But, they're like, I don't believe in God. What do I do? I can't get with the recovery, the refuge, like they get lost. And, I didn't call it God. I mean, it evolves over time. It definitely is a higher power. Mm-hmm. And the higher power I just find is like spiritual. So I found it honestly in that moment of yoga and breathing. And it was, I don't know if I do get, the spiritual enlightenment. I get all that stuff. I have visions all the time when I'm meditating. And I know that my higher power is speaking to me then and talking through me. There's a lot that sort of when you trust and surrender, that's when I really found recovery. If you can find yourself in a place, again, it comes from trusting yourself in order to really let go and surrender. But you have to have something that you believe in that's bigger than yourself. So, but it could just be spirit. Like I do believe that I'm 100% connected with the spirit or the universe that's sort of around me. And I just try to tell people too, when they're trying to find it, you can't really look for it. It just is there, and it just will show up when you're ready. Because if I didn't have that moment, I was like, sure, like a higher power is great, but I didn't feel it until that moment. And then it just never leaves me. And then I'm just, every time I meditate, it's there. Every time in the car, and I always talk about the universe or the spirit of my higher power. It does like to make jokes on me. If I'm going in the wrong direction in the world, it closes doors real fast. Real funny. It's really funny. And I always talk in my car. I'm like, thanks. Thanks, universe. Thanks, higher power.
Thanks for that.
I'm changing my foot pattern. I'm going this way. And then you start to see real positive things happen around you. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's amazing. A friend of mine talked about like that kind of energy. Well, first I had a friend who, when he first got sober, he was like a Star Wars fan and he called it the Force.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
I know, right? Isn't that great? Yeah, it was the Force.
That is great. I'm going to start using that with my daughter.
I know, right? And there's just the symbolism that it's all around you, and it is, because that's what it is. But I have a friend who sort of describes it like, and you'll probably relate to this because you have all this movement practice, right? But it's this idea that you're sitting in a car and your hands are on the steering wheel, but until you start moving, you can't really steer it, right? Like God is kind of the spirit, or God is sort of like, it's like we have to start moving, and then they kind of steer the wheel a little bit. But it's like it won't go anywhere until you start moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that action.
And it helps me a lot, with like worry about the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, meditation's such a powerful thing for that, but it's really, at this point, it's a combination of just like speaking to my higher power and meditating, or allowing that spirit to speak to me. Because it was really wasted energy, honestly, worrying in the moment. It really, there's no sense. It's just negative energy flowing through your body. You don't move in any direction. You just stay stuck.
Worrying is wasted energy. I totally agree.
Yeah, and you get exhausted from it.
Right.
And I have to do a lot of talk to myself. I use the word like cancel all the time.
I do too.
Yeah, that was like Ayanna Parent. I heard like she was speaking one time and she was like, just say cancel. I'm like, oh, I'm stealing that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love that.
So, I do that in my head. Like when I start to go down a negative road, in my head, I'm like, cancel. And I was telling my friend the other day, I'm like, these people must think I'm crazy in the car because I do so much talking to myself in the car. Like out loud. Like,
yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of visualizations that have sort of come to fruition for anyone that's like interested in meditating. Like once you sort of settle in with that, it's pretty powerful. Like this, I visualized my office that I'm in right now before it even happened. Like I was meditating one day and the vision sort of came of like, this is what it sort of looks like. And you probably like I literally opened my eyes, called my husband, and I said, we got to see if this office is open. And we did, and I was in there the next week.
That is so powerful.
And here we are with Be Free Coaching and Consulting. That was like literally within a week. I was like, whoa, okay. Because it was one of those things, it's like either I move on this and think it's like a pipe dream, or I go with the universe is really telling me to move in this direction. And so I just did.
Oh, that's amazing. I love those stories because there's, vision is so powerful. There was this really old book by Shakti Gawain, Creative Visualization. And I think it's so important that we use our mind and our vision appropriately through meditation. And like I just did a practice with vision boards. I really like those.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, they say that worrying is praying for what you don't want because you're really just focused on what you don't want. Right. And so when you meditate and you're opening your mind to the possibilities of something positive and you're using visualization, you're actually manifesting what it is that you do want, right?
Right, exactly. Yep. And that's sort of why I've opened Be Free too, because as a social worker in therapy, people are sitting there telling their therapist all these negative stories constantly, over and over again. And then, like, where does your body just gets like torn down because all those issues stay stuck in your heart, in your tissues, in your mind. Even though you feel better because in the moment you're talking about it, you're not replacing it or filling yourself up with anything better or different or that's going to shift or change the alignment of your thinking.
Absolutely.
So for Be Free, I was like, you have one opening session to dump.
Okay, I
get it
like
out
that.
I'm not going to ask you about it again. I have enough information on the first session to know where we're going. That's all I need. And then I feed off their energy and sort of what they're presenting in terms of the powerfulness of the moment and how we can work on some of those issues together. So it's not, almost like remove the story. That's not your story anymore. Like you've worked on that, you've said that, you got it out, we're good. Like let's move your body, let's move your mind, let's move this in a different direction.
That is brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. And it's just more fun for me.
I know, right?
That's terrible, but I mean...
Well, listen, it doesn't serve...
I don't know how people heal otherwise.
Exactly. It doesn't serve anybody to let somebody wallow around.
No.
I mean, I think there was this old Native American tradition where the tribe would allow anybody, sitting around the campfire to say whatever they needed to say, like tell their story 3 times. And then after the 3rd time, if you tried to do it again, they just get up and leave. They just will not be witness to. I understand that people need to vent, they need validation, but let's move on, people.
Sure.
Let's start focusing and attracting what we do want, not focusing on what we don't want.
Yeah, and then that's where they get so ahead of themselves. So I'm actually doing the coaching session, it's like, no, I'm bringing you back to how are you feeling right this moment? And they're totally fine most of the time. So it's like, okay, let's capitalize on that. Let's move you into a pose. Let's breathe. Let's capitalize on them. So it's like that story is not affecting you actually in this moment. Your mind's just convincing yourself that it is.
Why do you think that is? It feels like people default back to the negative story. Why do you think that is?
That is like another podcast.
Do you think it's like neuropsychology, like it's habitual?
It's a lot, yeah. I think it's a lot of training. It's a lot of Western, it's a lot of society. It's a lot of fear. We're in a society that lives in fear a lot from a lot of things. And the training, it's a new notion that this is the way to heal. I mean, from social work school, it's been so long for me now, but the same sort of thing with like the AA model. It's like you work from deficits and then you try to heal, you diagnose and then you heal, right? I'm not diagnosing, and it sounds crazy. I don't even believe in them anymore. Even though I was trained, I could diagnose anybody in the DSM-4 or 5, whatever. However, they are just symptoms of who you are as a person in the world.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that medication's not going to help if it's a chronic thing, but it has to be sort of the person's understanding of who they are, so much so that they are making that choice to heal that piece of themselves. And so there's a clear definition, there's a clear guidance, there's a clear mindset. So I think that's sort of the way we've just operated in the world for so long. And it's hard to change. It really is hard to change. Like coaching for some people, they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They're not used to the model being so flipped. It is hard.
Yeah, it is a paradigm shift.
Right, totally, paradigm shift, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, and what you're really talking about is, it sounds like when you address somebody, alcohol, drugs, all that stuff, it's a symptom, right? It's a symptom of a deeper problem.
It's a symptom, exactly.
And so and it sounds like you did a lot of that work, and I kind of want to go back to your experience with your daughter, because I just as an outside observer, I just think it's so interesting that you chose this path of adopting a daughter who went through something like you. It's like parenting your inner child, right? Like she's there before you, and you know what I mean? You're parenting, you're doing for her.
Yes, and I didn't make that connection until I was in treatment the first time. That's so funny. And that's why I'm writing the book with Anna, because it's like all of this stuff is so powerful to sort of talk about. Because I did, without knowing that I did it, my subconscious certainly brought this into my life. She was homeless and living with her mom. Like
totally.
It's very parallel. But it wasn't like I was like, let me go do this. It was like I was sitting in treatment being like, oh my God. This is
how did this happen?
How did I get here? Like, I mean, you can look back and just sort of see, But I do remember there was a really powerful moment in treatment where I had to sort of, because I was so distraught about not being a good mom, because that's all I wanted to be, and then all of a sudden I was this like drunken, horrible, traumatic mess, and so I had to like get so much help with that. And so there was a really powerful moment where they asked if I was, okay with just doing some visualization and some talking to my inner child. I was like, I am up for anything at this point. Like, bring it on. I just want to be healthy. So it was really powerful. I went back to the, sort of visualization of when I was little, and then brought my mom in visually, and then brought my adult self to talk to my mom, and then talk to my younger self. And just sort of talked about safety and security, and you're okay from here on out. Like the three of us are going to work together to sort of move you in a positive direction. There I am crying now, but I do remember that moment being like, oh my God, like I'm okay, but I really had to heal that piece of myself in order to parent her, because there was no way that my little traumatized self was going to be able to do that for her. And so now we're good. We're great. Just celebrated her 6th birthday yesterday. She's thank God, she's the happiest person in the world. She thought I went to a retreat.
Aww.
She's so cute. She thought I was at a yoga retreat.
Sweet.
And she came to visit me, which was great. So she was very supportive of me being at my retreat.
It's interesting. There's this idea that we recreate our family of origin. to heal our own wounds, right?
Yeah,
And it's so, I hear it all the time. People like that are recovering from addiction, that they have a parent who was in addiction and they swear that they're never going to be like their parent. Then they turn out to be just like them.
Right. Oh
Right?
my God.
But
yeah, I didn't drink all in high school. Didn't drink not one drop. I was like, no, I can't. My mom's got those issues. No, I'm going to stay away from that. Oh my God, I got to college.
yeah.
Wow,
But don't you find that going through that experience, finding yourself in the same shoes as your mom raising a daughter, that was like a gift because did you find compassion for your mom?
Oh, yeah. See, I've always had compassion for my mom. It's strange. Like, I did have a higher power, even though she was an atheist. She was super spiritual. So she and I were always super connected. Like, we were connected enough where, like, we would have dreams the same and, like, wake up, did you dream about that? Yes. We were like, yeah. So but, there was a lot of anger to harbor there.
I'm sure. I got stuck a little bit. Atheist, a spiritual atheist? Isn't it just agnostic? Oh, okay.
I guess so.
I guess so.
I suppose you could say that, but she would swear up and down that she didn't, like, believe in anything.
Okay,
this is sort of like how she rolled. She was a very crafty woman. She would talk like, I don't believe in effing God, like, whatever, da-da-da. But then her energy was so powerfully spiritual, and she and I were spiritually connected. Like, we knew what each other was thinking, like, that kind of thing. Yeah, so there was a lot of, and she talked as if, when she wasn't around me, I just needed to, like, think about her. So she had all these ways of, so she would call herself an atheist, but we all. So
that's more like, not, like, I grew up in the church, and for a long time I was like, I'm not religious. Sometimes people don't separate, God from religion.
Yeah, she didn't believe in
God.
God.
But it's interesting because we all have sort of that deep inner idea that there's something, we just don't know what it is, and I like calling it spirit too, because yeah, she would never say those words. It's just being around who you kind of knew. Even though she would, she hated God. She would always say, like, if there was a God, the people, there wouldn't be racism, people wouldn't get raped. Like, it was just, that was her belief. But, yeah. No, that's hard. So you find yourself a mother to a daughter, and can you, I don't know how much you want to share about your daughter's biological mother, but that must have been like a can of worms that you had to wrestle with at some point, right?
Yeah, it was kind of difficult because, God bless her, she was dealing with her own stuff, and I'm pretty sure there was addiction there too, and she was young and there was some developmental stuff there, but she just couldn't show up. She just couldn't be there. She couldn't come for visits, and it was awful having to go and she wouldn't show up, and that was a whole piece of it. But she had a good lawyer that just kept fighting. We probably could have adopted her earlier if that wasn't the case. But because of that, it ended up 2 years of just battling court.
Oh, so you got her when she was really little.
3, yeah, we got her when she was 3.
So she doesn't really, does she remember a lot from her first 3 years?
No, like, if you ask her questions, she can remember some, but she doesn't. I asked her the other day if she remembered what her mom looked like, and she said no.
Oh, wow.
And we're open, like, she's very open about talking about it. She knows she's adopted. We had, like, a huge adoption party with, like, almost 100 people.
That's beautiful.
I was, like, all about celebrating it. I'm like, we are celebrating this. Yeah, her adoption party was bigger than Christmas, bigger than her birthday. We just went out to dinner for her birthday.
Oh, how sweet.
But her adoption party, I was like, yeah, because I was like, I want her to feel that she's meant to be with us, and that there's nothing but love here, and there's no, anything but that. No confusion, just that you are in our family now, and we're making it official. And the court day was amazing, and they were super nice on adoption day, and the judge that was there had been with her case the whole time. So he had known her since she was first removed.
Oh, wow.
Which is incredible. Yeah, so he was saying, he was there talking to us about that, and I'm bawling my eyes out in court. I'm like, oh
Oh,
my
that's
God.
so beautiful. It's such an amazing thing that you guys
It
are
is,
doing for
yeah.
her. And what a healing thing it is for you.
Yeah, well, and for us, as you can see. Yeah, and for me. Yeah. Which I was saying, like, I got to write.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your book. It sounds like it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the story, but I'm working with Anna David, so the proposal will be done in June, and I'm not 100% sure on the title yet, so that will have to come out. But it's, the caveat is sort of like a path to freedom through the journey of addiction and adoption, so that'll be
Oh, I
the
love
subtitle.
that.
Yeah, and so it'll talk about it's kind of interweave for different points of like when I first went to detox, and then interweave into the treatment where I have all the memories. So then it'll go back to when I was little and some of the interactions between me and my mom, and some of the times she didn't show up,
Oh,
and
wow.
some of those experiences of her drinking that I can remember. There's a piece in there about the first time I went to AA with her and her complaining and hating it.
Right.
And then the journey of my addiction and coming to healing and process, and then getting blessing, and then coming back and getting my daughter and going through the whole piece of healing for myself, and then starting my own business and where I
Oh,
am
that's
today.
beautiful. That's amazing. I can't wait to read
Yeah,
it.
so it's in the process. It's in the
Yeah,
process.
absolutely. So, how long have you been clean and sober now?
So it is a year and let's see, I don't really count. I'm like not one of those counters, but a year and
Okay,
something, 2
a
months.
year plus. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not big. A year plus. I counted to the year. I knew when that was. Counting for me is not. It's counterproductive. I know it isn't for
Well,
lots of
listen,
people, but it's just
this is what
yeah.
I've learned is that different things work for different people, right? There isn't just
Yeah.
one way. I myself,
Right.
I'm super plugged into the 12-step community. It's just an easy form of service. Like it's like a place where I can
Sure.
give back, and service is a big part of my recovery. And I like talking about this stuff, and so it supports
Yeah.
my recovery lifestyle. But you know what? I'm well aware
Yeah.
that that doesn't work for everybody, right? And so that's what I'm really curious about is
Yeah.
like, what are the fundamental principles that keep people sober? And you are someone who you have
Yeah.
done all the excavating of the past and making peace and healing, and then you've dedicated your life to service, and you do have the
Yeah. Yeah.
connection with spirit. It's like those seem to be the things that help people stay sober, to not drink, or you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
applaud all the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it's
that.
so important. I mean, there's what's more
Thank you.
important than healing our wounds and then healing the world, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much when we're alive, I think,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. And learning.
If there's a purpose, that would be it.
That's right.
I think
I
so.
love that. I love that. And so, maybe you could walk me through, do you have like the name of the podcast is ODAAT Chat, meaning one day at a time, right? And so recovery for me is about,
Yeah.
how do you stay sober one day at a time? So do you have like a
Yeah.
daily practice, or do you have like structure around what you do to maintain your recovery?
Yeah. So I have to be sort of strict about it because I don't go to AA. I did the 90 and 90 in the beginning, but I just found doing yoga and meditation was just so much more powerful. But I do a lot of rituals. So I don't have anyone do anything in my coaching that I don't do
Right.
myself, because I just believe that that's really, some people, I was a social worker for a really long time and taught people how not to drink, and I was an alcoholic. So I moved away from
We
that.
teach what we need to learn.
Right. So now I can't, because it's different. The coaching model is different. So I can talk about the path for me and how it can relate to, recovery. But staying in the moment for me is number one. Like, again, tomorrow is tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be sober tomorrow, but I do know that I have right now. I have this moment. I have my feet. I'm talking to you, and, you got to stay grateful in all of that. So I do try to meditate, even if it's 10 minutes a day at least, Typically, I'd like try before I start anything. I come to my office before I do anything. I just at least try to settle in and do some meditation, and then halfway through the day before I transition. And typically, I'm teaching fitness classes at night, so I don't really do it then. So I do that. I lean on people. I call people if I'm getting in a funk. I just call them. Hey, this is what's going on. Whether it's all my friends know whether they're in recovery or not that I'm calling and. I say right off the bat, I need you for like
Good
5
for
minutes.
you.
Let me just walk me through this moment. I'm stressed. I'm like freaking out. I don't know. You can always get somebody, so that's, they do that in AA as well. And really just honestly, the number one thing I can just say is being healthy in the mind of really meditating and staying in the moment. And I do a lot of yoga for myself. I do a lot of mantras in yoga. So if I'm struggling with like a particular thing personally, like I will do yoga and say it to myself. Like sometimes I'm just, I don't know, there's family stuff going on and I'm like, if my inner child stuff's happening, if I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling off balance. I use like the mantra, like I'm safe, I'm secure, I'm okay. Like, and I will say that through an hour and a half of yoga as I do it.
Oh, I love that.
And that would be, and so that takes a lot to kind of identify what it is that I need and then bring it into yoga and then practice it. It does take a lot of work to be able to do that. But that's what I do now in terms of like the rituals. And then just realizing that like whatever, like sometimes I will be working and I will be so booked, but something doesn't feel right and it's just not happening. So I stop working. I go home, I take a nap. Like I take care of myself in those ways. Like it's okay the world's going to keep moving. Problems are going to be there tomorrow. But if you don't stop right now and breathe and be in the moment with whatever's happening and moving through whatever the pain is, whatever the emotion is, it's just going to carry over to the next day and get bigger. So I spend a lot of time just doing that as well. And then being with my daughter really, really, really helps. Just, she's so joyful.
Right. And allowing, nurturing her, caring for her is really like an outward expression of caring for your inner child that needs that self-care.
Mm-hmm.
No, I really like that. I mean, I see some reoccurring themes. It's like you're connecting to spirit and being present, gratitude, connecting with others. There's a great TED Talk. This guy who did this whole thing about, he wasn't an addict, but I think a relative of his was. But he talked about the thing that heals us is connection. It's connection to spirit, connection to other people that can be very healing. So, no, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, and if AA works for any reason, a lot of it is because of the connection with the people, right? Like-minded people are connected to each other.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you. We're coming up on our time, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Okay.
I appreciate.
Oh, thank you.
I loved your story. Listen, I could talk to you forever, and we'll probably have to have a follow-up when you're done with your book.
Oh yeah, I will.
Yeah, come back and then tell me all about your book. I'll help you with your book launch and the marketing piece of that, and we'll get the word out when it's all done. And
great.
I'll certainly put all your contact information in the show notes. What's the best if someone wants to reach out to you and talk to you about some of this stuff? What is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Probably through email, through befreecoaching@mail. It's not Gmail. I don't think it's Gmail, but it's befreecoaching@mail.com. So it's B, just a single B, FREE coaching@mail.com.
Okay.
And then I'm all over Facebook. Yep, all over Facebook. They can reach me through BeFree has a Facebook page, Instagram. BeFreeCoaching.org is the website. They can reach me through there.
Perfect. I'll put the links in the show notes too.
Yep. And I can do sessions, over the internet or however people want to do it is fine.
Yeah, no, I think you have a very unique experience and that will help others. And I think it's so important that if, for people that are listening, that if you're an adult child of an alcoholic, that you reach out to other people who have been able to break their addictions by healing those very same things.
Yeah,
so important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a great day, and
let's
talk soon. Thanks so much.
Yeah, take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye. One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting ODAATchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.